Part 3, Acute Phase. Hello, welcome to the Part 3 video on the acute phase of part of our video series on living with postpartum psychosis and bipolar disorder. This is a really long video. I don't know how long it's going to go for, but hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a really great insight into what goes on during that acute phase. I'll just give you a warning. There is not any information about all the crazy ideas that people have when they're in a psychosis. Why? Because lots of people who go through a psychosis write stories about that, and it's part of their healing process, and it's really great that they do that, but it doesn't really help us help them. So that's definitely not the emphasis today. Okay, so if you wanted that, go find a different video. Let's continue with what we're focusing on today, which is the acute phase of postpartum psychosis. Here we go. So here's what I've written. After the birth, I became acutely manic. I stopped sleeping and I was very talkative. I had lots of bright ideas that I kept writing down on post-it notes. I couldn't stop myself. I also had an explosive temper and more psychotic symptoms. I thought I knew some strangers. I kept saying, it's all connected. I believed I discovered the secret to fertility. That's as far as I'm going to go about crazy ideas. Okay? So, what happens then? Someone, most likely a family member, will have realized you were behaving strangely. Maybe I'll change it to very strangely. And have hopefully contacted the nearest hospital for advice. In my experience, my mother contacted the maternity ward, who said to come as soon as possible. My family had to trick me into going by saying we were going to the maternity ward to inspect my bleeding after the birth. I'd had a torn placenta and was worried about that. So that's what they told me. We're going to the hospital, they're going to have a look. Once there, they brought me over to the emergency ward. My family left me there alone, and around midnight, I was transferred in a wheelchair to the high-risk psychiatric ward. In the first few days, they gave you lots of sleeping pills to try to get me to sleep. In my case, it took several days. They started me on my medicine, which you think, or which I thought, would only be a temporary thing. Most people take an antipsychotic medicine and a mood stabilizer, which is lithium. How are you feeling in this situation? You who's just been chucked into the hospital, you've just had a baby and you've been chucked into hospital by yourself in the middle of the night under bright white lights. You are absolutely terrified. You've just had a baby that's been taken away from you. You're alone, away from friends and family. You don't have access to your telephone. You see your baby and family only once or twice a day for 2 or 3 hours at set times. You are completely disorientated with the new routine. There are people coming in your room all day. There's cleaners, there's nurses testing your blood pressure and other medical things. There's nurses visiting your room every 15 minutes in the high-risk ward. Every 15 minutes, the same as through the whole night. Someone comes every 15 minutes to see if you're okay. And once you move to the low-risk ward, it's every 30 minutes, which is still a lot. And then you have to get into this routine of taking medicine. When everyone else takes medicine, you will have to line up to go and get medicine. And they force you to come and eat in the meal times at the right time. And you only get to see the psychiatrist who has all the power in the situation once per week on Mondays. So you spend the whole week waiting to see the psychiatrist, and then you're just rushed through. And then they say, oh yeah, we'll see you again next week. And don't do anything. What seems to you like they're not doing anything. All right, page 2. So, your sense of timing is all wrong. I'll be here only a couple of weeks. That's what you keep saying that at the beginning. And you say, I'll be better really soon. Yeah. And the medicine is only a temporary thing. This is what you're thinking at the beginning. It's all just a short thing. It's all going to stop soon. Nobody wants to tell you what's wrong with you as well. They keep you in the dark until you're ready to move to the low-risk ward. So they won't tell you have postpartum psychosis for the first few weeks because it's not meant to be in your interest to know that when you're not thinking straight. What happens next when you go to the low-risk ward? You have more privileges. You have less supervision, permission to go walking once per day, more optional activities. You get more information on your illness, like the fact that you have this thing that you've never heard of called postpartum psychosis. Actually, for me, the best privilege was getting paper. I would get pages and pages of paper every day because I just wanted to keep writing all the time. And then there's the impact on your family of all this that's going on. My husband had to take leave for the 9 weeks that I was in hospital to look after the baby. My mum, who lives 4 hours away by plane, stayed with us, and she was very lonely, staying in our tiny apartment, looking after my baby with my husband. She wasn't allowed to talk to anyone initially. The hospital would only contact one family member, which was my husband. This was super frustrating for my parents who wanted to be involved with everything. But that was their policy, the hospital's policy. No one was allowed to tell my friends and family what was happening, supposedly to protect me. It was mostly my dad that was driving that. And then, talking about my dad, there was denial as an impact on the family. Denial. My dad would not accept that I was having a psychosis. He said I was merely having a severe mania. And to this day, he won't admit that I had a very severe psychosis. What were the actual time frames? So I was in the acute ward for about a month, I think. It was a few weeks. And then I started having the medicine straight away, except not lithium. Why? Well, because I was completely misinformed and knew nothing about all these medicines. And I wanted to keep breastfeeding. So when my baby was visiting me, I was trying to still breastfeed him. But they kept begging me, please stop breastfeeding, because you can't breastfeed and have lithium. It's not good for the child. So eventually I was like, okay, all right, I give up. Yes, I'll have this lithium. Again, stressing the fact that I'm not a doctor, but lithium is like, if you're bipolar, you have to take lithium. It's the number one treatment for the mood disorder side of things. Yes, and then there were legal meetings. I've put that in the time frames. Because you can either be voluntarily, like a voluntary patient, or you can be an involuntary patient. And I was an involuntary patient. So I got given, here, look, there's more information here. Legal meetings. I was an involuntary patient. I was given a free legal aid representative. So a free lawyer was representing my case about being involuntarily admitted. I had 2 meetings maybe even 3, I haven't checked. But where they decide how long I need to stay in hospital and whether I need electroconvulsive therapy. I'll talk about electroconvulsive therapy in a minute. Yes, I will. And I had ECT around 8 weeks and I left the hospital around 9 weeks. Okay, those are the time frames for the acute phase, we'll say. All right, next page about the ECT. So what is electroconvulsive therapy? It's like in a horror film, A Clockwork Orange. Well, yes and no. The voltages are much lower than they used to be, but the science is still a bit grey. Yeah, they use it for treatment of depression and psychosis, and they don't really know why it works in some ways, but it does, so they still use it. It's still a really scary thing, and you try to avoid having to get that done. You want to avoid it at all costs. You really have it done when you really need it. Yeah. So for me, I had to have 5 rounds of treatment over about a 10-day period, right at the end of my hospital stay. Like, I was already starting to get better, but I just wasn't quite hitting it. So they said, look, let's do the ECT. There are several days during the treatment that I don't remember at all. The main thing I remember was I had a really wonderful orderly called Dave, who looked after me like I was a supermodel waiting to go on stage before each operation. He was just golden. We were sitting in wheelchairs covered in blankets because it was the middle of winter, and the other girl getting treatment with me, we both had teddy bears in our laps. My mum was absolutely devastated to see what it did to me. I was temporarily a mental vegetable, gonna call it. She was totally distraught. As the days wore on, I came back to something resembling more normal. So when I left the hospital, I was taking lithium and an antipsychotic, and my baby was taking bottled milk, and I finished the ECT treatment. I had huge anxiety going back home after getting used to the hospital. I was scared of everything: kitchen knives, razors, gas, electricity, you name it. I was scared of everything. I didn't drive for several months. I had panic attacks on train stations. There was a whole support team looking after me when I left the hospital that I will talk about in the next video. In summary, for this video, postpartum psychosis is a severe mental illness. It has an impact on not only on you, but all of your loved ones. Even though there is much better awareness of mental illness, postpartum psychosis remains a taboo illness in my experience. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will come back for the next one, the early recovery from postpartum psychosis. Thanks for listening. Bye.